Chapter 526. Castle Lord. When the guards at the prison cell's entrance saw that, they cried out in panic. A guard directly pounced forward, blocking in front of the castle lord. That whirlwind directly struck the guard's chest. "You want to kill me?" The castle lord's expression turned gloomier and gloomier, as though it was covered with a layer of frost, as an intense chill shot out from his eyes. "You actually want to kill me? You're sick." Yiqing Luo kept her feather fan as she stared at him vigilantly. "You're allowed to kill me, but I'm not allowed to retaliate. Your life is mine. If I want you to die, then you have to die." The castle lord's gloomy eyes were swirling with a whirlpool, as though it was going to swallow up everything around it. Yiqing Luo's brows creased as she was stared at by that pair of eyes until her hair stood on end. She was absolutely certain that this castle lord was sick. And it wasn't a light illness. Yiqing Luo couldn't be bothered to tangle with this castle lord who had a hole in his brain. That bunch of brothers of hers were still waiting for her at the exquisite pagoda. "My life is my own, no one can control my life." Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes slightly as her lips curled into an enchanting smile. "Castle Lord keeps saying that I've forgotten about you, yet still acting so irritable. Could it be I'm Castle Lord's dream lover?" Her tone was extremely frivolous, with a hint of a Casanova flirting with a decent lady. But this frivolous tone made one unable to feel annoyed. Those guards who were holding on to the head of the prison guard and those injured guards were all shocked. They stared at Yiqing Luo with their mouths agape, totally unable to believe that there was such a shameless, audacious lady in this world. Yiqing Luo's meaning was very obvious. She was ridiculing the castle lord for pestering her endlessly, which meant that she totally didn't know the castle lord, and narcissistically treating herself as the castle lord's dream lover. But the castle lord indeed didn't seem right. If it was any other intruder, even if it was a lady in the castle lord's eyes, she was just a tool to work for Death God Castle. They had never seen their castle lord treating a lady like this. No, to put it more accurately, they had never seen their castle lord being so attentive towards anyone. In the eyes of the castle lord, no one could be tolerated. In this way, the raging fury in the dungeon guards' hearts towards Yiqing Luo slowly subsided. "Today my thoughts are indeed a little chaotic. Why don't we meet again another day and have a good chat, how about that?" Yiqing Luo's eyes narrowed as her lips curled into a charming smile, becoming more and more flirtatious. Her smile was like a blossoming mandala, releasing a soul-stirring charm. The castle lord was still expressionless, but his frosty eyes were faintly flickering with a faint luster. Just at this moment, the feather fan in Yiqing Luo's hand suddenly opened up. All the straw in the dungeon was swept up by the whirlwind. That speed was extremely fast. In an instant, all of them covered the castle lord's body. The straw had an extremely pungent smell. Before the guards could react, they felt a whirlwind blow past them. In the cell, apart from the castle lord who was covered in straw and resembled a wooden stake, there was no one else. "Castle master." The guards were all alarmed. "Chase them. Give chase. Stop that woman and god thief. Go and shoot the signal flare." Some guards swiftly reacted as they stood up and ran while shouting for their companions. "No need." Her cold voice was light and slow, but it was filled with an irresistible charisma. The guards' footsteps halted. The guards who were surrounding the castle lord, helping him to sweep away the smelly straw on his body, were all stunned. Earlier when he was facing that young lady, he was fierce and evil, shouting for her to kill. Now their castle lord intentionally let that young lady go, not hesitating to let that young lady sweep his entire body with smelly straw. Chapter 527. Yiqing Luo brought God Thief along as she executed her blink movement, and in a blink of an eye, she teleported to the place where the guards were resting. Her sharp vision swept the surroundings and very quickly, she saw a stone door in front of the guards' resting room. This should be the exit. She had not wasted her efforts to calculate the location of the guards' resting room in her mind. Yiqing Luo turned her head towards the direction of God Thief's locked prison cell and didn't hear any footsteps chasing up to them. She heaved a sigh of relief. Earlier when she led God Thief to execute his blink movement, she actually had no confidence. After all, she had only comprehended less than 20% of the blink movement secret art. Just her alone blink movement was already a little strenuous. Bringing God Thief along to blink movement, the The success rate wasn't high. But just as she condensed her profound chi onto the glower flame fan and swept up that whirlwind, preparing to pull God Thief along to try to execute her blink movement, God Thief's hoarse voice rang beside her ears. Listen carefully to the incantation that I'm going to recite. Direct the incantation towards your profound heart jade and combine it with your original blink movement secret art. Without waiting for her reaction, a string of complicated incantation was transmitted into her ears. Luckily her memory was strong and her reaction was godly. At the same time when she heard the incantation, she swiftly recited the incantation and followed God Thief's instructions. She successfully brought God Thief along and teleported successfully. At this moment Yiqing Luo had no time to ask God Thief why he knew the blink movement secret art. Are you able to keep up with our current actions? Yiqing Luo glanced sideways at God Thief as she supported him and walked slowly towards the stone door. Although God Thief's limbs moved slightly, but after all he had been restrained for 10 years and his body's various functions weren't able to return to normal so quickly. Every single step he took was supported by Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo had already touched the stone door's switch. Seeing the stone door slowly opening up, revealing the pitch-black and strange secret passage, Yiqing Luo glanced sideways at God Thief whose face was filled with embarrassment and didn't say anything more as she directly squatted down in front of him. God Thief was stunned. After waiting quietly for a moment, Yiqing Luo became impatient as she patted his shoulder. Quickly. If they chase up to us, none of us will be able to escape. God Thief's pitch-black face didn't show any emotions. He pursed his dry lips as his bright eyes sparkled with an unknown dark emotion. This little girl, why was it so different? You could have left me behind. Before he could finish his words, Yiqing Luo could no longer tolerate it as her body arched downwards, forcefully carrying his body on her back. God Thief obviously sensed that Yiqing Luo's breathing had turned heavier. Although he had suffered miserably in the dungeon over the past 10 years, and his entire body had become thinner, he was still able to maintain his composure. But he was still a man. Yiqing Luo didn't hesitate as she carried him on her back and directly walked into the secret tunnel. He stared at this girl who looked extremely thin but was filled with great hope. Holy Pirate's heart, which had been silent for 10 years, slowly came back to life. Looks like the turning point of his fate had really arrived. One harbored such thoughts while the other was concentrating on searching for the map drawn by Zhou Xian in her mind. No one noticed that after they stepped into the secret passage, the stone door behind them quickly closed. Before it closed, a pair of bone-chilling yet complicated eyes stared at them without blinking. Fort Master. The guard beside him was so frightened that he couldn't guess what the Fort Master was thinking. The Fort Master's eyes were cold. Just one look seemed to make one fall into an ice cellar, chilling to the bone. She wasn't pretending. The way she looked at him was as though she was looking at a stranger. He had really forgotten about him. Had forgotten who he was. Chapter 528. After stepping into the secret tunnel, Yiqing Luo was initially still very cautious, afraid that there were any mechanisms or arrays. After walking for a long distance, they did not encounter any danger. After turning a corner, Yiqing Luo heaved a sigh of relief when she saw the secret tunnels extending in all directions. Finally, it was the secret passage on the map. Yiqing Luo searched for her current location in her mind and found the secret tunnel in the direction of the exquisite pagoda as she headed straight for it. Young lady, the direction to leave is that way. God Thief laid on Yiqing Luo's shoulder as he reminded her. Yiqing Luo's footsteps didn't stop as she followed the map in her memory and the array marked by Zhou Xian, speedily avoiding every single array. Even though she was carrying Holy Pirate on her back, it did not slow her down. The strange footwork under his feet continued to be displayed. Holy Pirate furrowed his eyebrows. His eyes were filled with confusion. However, he didn't open his mouth to remind her again. Yiqing Luo was able to accurately avoid all the arrays that were set up, and when faced with numerous secret passageways, she didn't hesitate to choose a passageway to advance swiftly. Clearly he knew where these secret passages led to. As Yiqing Luo walked forward, she scanned the surroundings. Along the way he didn't see any signs of a fight or blood stains in the secret passage. Yiqing Luo heaved a sigh of relief as they neared the direction of the exquisite pagoda's secret chamber. However, he didn't have the time to finish exhaling. Yiqing Luo's footsteps suddenly halted. The expression on his face was somewhat grave. She could hear the sounds of fighting coming from the secret chamber where the exquisite pagoda was hidden. Maybe it was because he had smelled the bloody stench of holy pirate on his back for a long time. At this moment, the smell of fresh blood that seeped into his nose was extremely strong. Our brothers are in trouble. Yiqing Luo's pupils contracted as she increased her speed and directly rushed into the secret room. There were several luminous pearls hanging in the secret chamber. It illuminated the entire secret chamber. The secret chamber was already in chaos. The youngsters of the World Group were wielding their weapons as they battled with a bunch of cultivators dressed in green robes with mercenary group badges on their chests. Iron-blooded knights. Yiqing Luo saw the totem on the mercenary group badge. Wasn't he Yuqi Peng's Iron Blood Knight? There were quite a number of Iron Blood Knights, at least 40 of them. 30 over people were fighting with the World Group's youngsters. The remaining dozen or so people took out 3 interspatial bags and tossed all the rare treasures in the secret chamber into them. An interspatial pocket was a magical artifact that was second only to an interspatial ring. Normally, a space pocket could only hold 100 items at most. He really didn't want to let go of even the slightest bit of advantage. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes. Those people who were still in battle had not discovered her arrival. Yiqing Luo placed God Thief in a corner. Wait for me here. Saying that, Yiqing Luo clenched the feather fan in her hands tightly as she stood up and walked towards the World Group's direction. The leader of the Iron Blood Warriors was Yuqi Peng. Yan Xiaoyi and Xiao Jin trapped Yuqi Peng together and fought with him. Yuqi Peng's weapon was a huge axe. As he brandished it, it brought along a strong burst of profound energy, forcing Yan Xiaoyi and Xiao Jin to join forces, before they could barely block his gigantic axe. Whereas at this moment, behind Yan Xiaoyi and Xiao Jin, an Iron Blood Warrior cultivator got close to them as he silently raised the huge blade in his hands and directly chopped down towards their heads. Yiqing Luo's expression congealed as the feather fan in her hands opened up and numerous iron wires flew out, directly coiling around that cultivator's neck. Her fingers clasped the feather fan tightly as she pulled with all her might. The Iron Blood Warrior cultivator's body was flung towards Yuqi Peng. Chapter 529. Instantly, flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Yan Xiaoyi and Xiao Jin reacted in time as they speedily retreated, evading the huge axe's profound qi fluctuations. Qing Luo. On seeing that familiar figure appearing in front of them, the both of them were overjoyed. The other youngsters who were battling heard Yan Xiaoyi's voice and immediately turned their gazes over. Indeed, they saw that slender figure standing in front of Yuqi Peng. Her posture was outstanding as she stood upright. Her pair of charming eyes were like torches, as though it was tainted with endless frost as she stared coldly at Yuqi Peng. She didn't look at them. But the youngsters could feel Yiqing Luo's worry towards them. Their hearts, which had been hanging in suspense, mysteriously calmed down. As long as Yiqing Luo was here, everything would not be a problem. There was no difficulty which could obstruct their footsteps. They had already barged into Death God Castle and obtained the exquisite pagoda. Were they still afraid of the Iron Blood Warriors? Trying to spoil their mission, trying to disintegrate the World Group? No. But they could. The youngsters' battle intent was instantly ignited at the instance when Yiqing Luo appeared. God Thief, who was sitting in the corner, trying his best to loosen up his muscles, and when he saw this scene, a sliver of astonishment flashed past his eyes. These youngsters actually exploded with energy which made him feel overwhelmed in an instant. Their gazes were filled with a confident glow. Was it because of Yiqing Luo's appearance? It seemed as though these youngsters' gazes were indeed revolving around the young lady. Indeed, a lass who was filled with surprises. He was getting more and more interested in this lass. At this moment, Yiqing Luo didn't know what God Thief was thinking about. Her cold gaze swept past Yuqi Peng in disdain as her lips curled into a sneer of ridicule. Eldest young Master Yuqi is such a filthy person. What's the logic of snatching the mission which had already been given away? Given away? You're obviously the one who snatched it away forcefully. Yuqi Peng's eyes burst out with an eerie viciousness. This originally belongs to me. If you don't have the ability to keep this mission, then don't try to be brave. Yiqing Luo sneered. That's right, if you don't have the ability to keep the mission, then why try to be brave? Now you're like a sinister rat, playing tricks behind the scenes which really suits your Yuqi family's style. Yuqi Peng's expression turned stiff. Yiqing Luo's words were obviously mocking him. In the mercenary guild he was the one who couldn't hold on to the mission and gave it to the world group. A wisp of faintly discernible black energy flashed past Yuqi Peng's eyes. His hand which was holding the huge axe tightened as he directly chopped towards Yiqing Luo. "What are you talking about? Speak with your ability." When the axe chopped down it brought about an extremely strong fluctuation of Xianxia. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as she speedily took half a step back. Her eyes were filled with coldness as she curled her lips in disdain. Is young Master Yuqi so afraid of the world group? He actually didn't hesitate to use his own soul to make a deal. Looks like the Yuqi family's fate has come to an end. It was just as she and Old Man Song had guessed. This Yuqi Peng attached the aura of the dark forces onto the giant axe. Such a deal could easily end up like what happened to Yi Qingling in the past, where her soul was completely devoured by the dark forces' profound yin qi. The reason why Yuqi Peng was so confident was indeed because of the deal with the dark forces. Hearing Yiqing Luo's words, Yuqi Peng's expression changed slightly. His gloomy eyes were filled with coldness. Occasionally a wisp of black gas would flash past. How did you know? How did you know about the dark forces' energy? How did you know that he had used his soul to make a deal? His deepest hidden secret had been discovered by Yiqing Luo. He was even ridiculed by Yiqing Luo. This was as though his pride had been stepped on fiercely by Yiqing Luo. Chapter 530. Yiqing Luo's eyes sunk slightly. In her mind, Old Man Song sighed worriedly. If the dark force's energy was residing in Yuqi Peng's courtyard, then perhaps Yuqi Peng could still be saved. But now, Yuqi Peng chose to let the dark force's energy to attach itself to him at any time and place. Now that he was exposed by Yiqing Luo, his heart suffered a heavy blow. A restless and uneasy heart had an opening, allowing the dark force's energy to swiftly swallow Yuqi Peng's soul. When Yiqing Luo heard that, she recalled the previous Yiqing Ling. After she was controlled by the dark forces, she became a marionette. That energy was extremely strong. If the dark force's energy was completely merged with Yuqi Peng, then it would be even harder to deal with. This mission, Iron Blood Warriors must take it. Yuqi Peng suppressed the panic and fear in his heart from being seen through, as he waved the huge axe in his hand, chopping towards Yiqing Luo's head. Yiqing Luo's lips curled upwards as the feather fan in her hand spun, condensing profound qi into the feather fan, shooting out numerous bewitching red rays, like sharp blades meeting Yuqi Peng's attack. Yiqing Luo resisted Yuqi Peng's attack. Moreover, it was a relaxed look without any pressure at all. When Yan Xiaoyi and Qiao Jin saw this, they were reassured. At the same time, they joined the other youngsters' battle. Momentarily, the entire secret room was in chaos as the blood stench became thicker. In mid-air, the red ray's sharp blades spun, encircling Yuqi Peng's surroundings once. Following that, like a whirlwind, it directly spun towards Yiqing Luo's direction. Yiqing Luo's slender hand stretched out as she caught the feather fan steadily. The next second, her feet were like the wind as she speedily closed in on Yuqi Peng. Yuqi Peng's huge axe looked heavy, but when he waved it, it was extremely nimble. His reaction was extremely swift, as that axe blocked Yiqing Luo's flying red ray's sharp blades. Only when he blocked the last sharp blade, his back suddenly felt a chill. He saw Yiqing Luo, who was originally standing 10 steps away from him, suddenly appearing behind his back. He raised his huge axe, speedily turned around and chopped downwards. This turn, he saw that crafty sneer in Yiqing Luo's eyes. At the same time, Yuqi Peng felt a dull pain on his chest. He saw Yiqing Luo had unknowingly slipped out a dagger from the handle of that feather fan. The dagger pierced into his chest without missing an inch. Immediately following that, Yiqing Luo's slender hand slapped hard on the other side of his chest. The inertia caused Yuqi Peng's body to fly backwards. He pulled out the dagger that was stuck in his chest. His entire body smashed into the wall of the secret chamber. Yuqi Peng was in so much pain that his entire face contorted into a ball, as his pair of sinister and spicy eyes stared fiercely at Yiqing Luo. It was as if he wanted to tear her into pieces. Yiqing Luo pulled out a handkerchief from her sleeve and gently wiped the dagger on the handle of the fan. That posture, that attitude was almost cold and merciless. Eldest young Master Yuqi, even if this mission is given to you, Do you really think that you have this life to hand in this mission? Yiqing Luo sneered as she casually threw that blood-stained handkerchief onto the ground. She slowly walks towards Yuqi Peng. Her steps are light and her posture is elegant. A sense of fear arose in Yuqi Peng's heart for no reason. After being stabbed by Yiqing Luo followed by a palm strike, he could feel the energy in his body gradually disappearing. Yiqing Luo's stab was very accurate. It was just a finger's distance away from his heart. It made him feel so much pain that he wished he was dead, but it didn't take his life. Chapter 531. Yiqing Luo looked disdainfully at him from above as her eyes were filled with disdain. Yuqi Peng, think about it carefully. The Iron Blood Knights that you've worked so hard to manage, who are you going to hand over to as the group leader? Yuqi Peng's expression turned even more subservient. He was so angry that his entire body was twitching and shaking. The wound on his chest was getting more and more painful. Fresh blood kept gushing out, and in an instant, it had dyed his green long robe into blooming red flowers. You dare to kill me? Yuqi Peng clenched his teeth as he squeezed out these few words with extreme difficulty. His forehead was covered with cold sweat. Until now, Yuqi Peng still couldn't believe that he possessed such powerful strength. His profound grade had also risen by 3 grades because of this huge axe surging straight into earth profound grade. In just one move he was defeated in the hands of a young lass who was still wet behind her ears. Kill you? Do you need me to do it? Yiqing Luo sneered in disdain as she squinted her eyes as she looked at the huge axe in his hand with a smile which didn't look like a smile. You. This was simply a naked humiliation. Yuqi Peng was so angry that he gritted his teeth as a ball of red emerged on his pale face due to the raging flames. Smart eldest young Master Yuqi, still haven't discovered it? Yiqing Luo's brows rose slightly as the arc on her lips became extremely ridiculing. What do you mean? Yuqi Peng realized the strangeness in Yiqing Luo's words as his heart suddenly contracted. An ominous premonition started to spread from the bottom of his heart. His question didn't get an answer. Yiqing Luo smiled lightly as that long and narrow eyes curled into an alluring arc. That pair of charming eyes was fixed on a certain spot. Yuqi Peng followed her gaze as he looked over. In a split second his entire face turned as white as paper. His pupils widened as his entire body started to tremble uncontrollably. He saw the blood oozing out from his chest. Those drops of blood formed a bloodline, and with an extremely fast speed, it flowed towards the huge axe in his right hand. Yuqi Peng's pupils continued to expand. What was going on? This huge axe actually sucked human blood. The surrounding Iron Blood Warriors, cultivators, and the World Group's youngsters were all stunned by this scene. They watched in disbelief as the densely packed bloodlines spread out on Yuqi Peng's body. Making a deal with your soul doesn't mean that you will give your soul to the other party after you die. Yiqing Luo looked at his terrified and flustered look, watching him struggling on his deathbed as she laughed softly. Living souls are much more delicious than dead souls. What the dark forces want is the soul that you leave first. Yiqing Luo's slender fingers pressed against her lower jaw. Her curved eyes were filled with an enchanting smile. Save me. Because of fear, Yuqi Peng's entire face was already distorted, looking sinister and terrifying. No wonder he felt his strength draining away so quickly. No wonder he felt like he couldn't muster any strength. You know, this is a soul exchange. You can definitely save me, save me. There was no one who did not fear death. Especially someone like Yuqi Peng who was extremely ambitious. How could he bear to die now? There are conditions for saving you. Yiqing Luo's eyes were cold. Yuqi Peng hurriedly nodded his head. As long as you save me, I will agree to any request. I promise you everything. Yiqing Luo's vision revolved around the surroundings. All of you have heard that right. Those cultivators who were scared silly were now in a dazed state. Perhaps it was because Yiqing Luo's aura was too strong. When Yiqing Luo's gaze fell onto them, all of them subconsciously straightened their backs. Heard it. Yiqing Luo looked towards Emo Han Shang. Chapter 532. Emo Han Shang's identity was the most powerful proof. He wasn't afraid that Yuqi Peng would regret. Unless he didn't want to mingle in the mercenary world anymore. Then, I'll save you. Yiqing Luo took a step back as she looked at Yuqi Peng's malevolent and twisted face as her lips curled cruelly. But can you take it? Yes. King. As long as I can keep my life, I can take any kind of pain. Peng felt that the blood in his body was almost sucked dry. His face turned paler and paler and he didn't even have the energy to open his mouth to speak. His heart was getting more and more flustered as he kept urging Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes as her expression was calm without even blinking as she shook the feather fan in her hands. A red ray-sharp blade shot out. Ah! A miserable shriek was heard from Peng's mouth. That hand which was holding the huge axe was directly chopped off. Fresh blood started to gush out. At the instant when his hand was chopped off, Peng's energy which he had lost instantly returned to his body. He was in so much pain that he kept rolling on the ground. Iron Blood Warriors cultivators were all dumbstruck. Yiqing Luo actually chopped off their group leader's hand? But they didn't dare to say a single word. They were afraid of Yiqing Luo. A 14 or 15-year-old young lady after doing such a cruel thing, could still display such calmness. Even that pair of cold and charming eyes didn't have the slightest fluctuation. Yiqing Luo. Peng was in so much pain that he curled up into a ball as the fury and hatred in his heart surged up at this instance. She chopped off his hand. He wanted to hold the huge axe, the hand which led the Iron Blood Warriors into battle. But it was chopped off just like that. From now onwards he had become a cripple. What about me? Isn't this to save you? Yiqing Luo raised her brows disapprovingly. If not for this, do you think you still have the energy to howl so loudly? Peng's eyes which were filled with fury instantly choked. He was stunned for a moment as he endured the intense pain in his wrist. Indeed, earlier he didn't even have the energy to speak, not to mention rolling on the ground or even flying into a rage at Yiqing Luo. That feeling of his body being sucked dry, the feeling of his energy being sucked dry had disappeared. But if his hand was chopped off, how would he be able to wield an axe in the future? How would he be able to enter the battlefield? He could have just told him to throw away that giant axe, so why did he still? The dark force's energy is the profound yin qi. Once it absorbs your living soul, will you be able to struggle free from that broken axe? Yiqing Luo seemed to have seen through Peng's thoughts as she sneered. Even if she could really throw away that axe, Yiqing Luo would not say it out. She wasn't a kind-hearted person, and towards a person like Peng, if she didn't teach him a lesson, it would truly make Nanping furious. What kind of place was Death God Castle? This was a place that made countless thieves tremble in fear. She could understand that Peng wanted to take back the mission. But Yiqing Luo couldn't understand why Peng actually started a fight with the World Group in Death God Castle's secret room. If he triggered the mechanism, he would have the power of the dark forces to protect himself. But what about the others? Ever since Yiqing Luo had the idea of establishing a mercenary group, the World Group's youngsters were her reverse scale. She had merely chopped off one of Peng's hand, and that was already considered as being merciful. Yiqing Luo's half-squinted eyes were icy cold as her mind recalled the time when she was in the underground prison, seeing that sick castle lord as she shuddered. Chapter 533. Only then did the profound practitioners of the Iron Blood Warriors react. Fortunately, Peng specially brought along 2 alchemists for this trip. They were pushed in front of Peng, shivering as they helped Peng to stop his bleeding and bandage him up. They also fed him quite a lot of medicinal pills. Under Yiqing Luo's urging, they tossed and turned for the time it took to brew a cup of tea. By the time the blood on Peng's wrist had stopped, Yiqing Luo speedily asked everyone to leave the secret room. After everyone left the secret room, Yiqing Luo was still standing in the secret room. Qing Luo still not leaving? Yan Xiaoyi leaned in. But he saw Yiqing Luo walking to the side of the huge axe as she stared at that huge axe, half squinting her eyes as though she was thinking about something. On hearing that Yiqing Luo had yet to come out, Peng hurriedly ordered the cultivator who was carrying him to rush into the secret room. What are you doing? Although Yiqing Luo had saved his life, but from the bottom of his heart, Peng despised these brats who were still wet behind the ears. Moreover, he had always been suspicious of Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo didn't bother about Peng as she slowly squatted down. Peng then realized that Yiqing Luo wanted to take away his huge axe. Although the giant axe contained some dark forces power, the power was still there. To profounders, what they desired the most was strength. Peng was the same. Otherwise, he would not have used his soul to exchange for more power with the dark forces. Seeing Yiqing Luo's interest towards the huge axe, he thought of the huge axe's power. Fear was fear, but his thirst for power made him unwilling to truly give up on this giant axe. How could Yiqing Luo not see through Yu Qipeng's vile thoughts? She sneered and moved her body away. Are you sure you still want this broken axe? Yu Qipeng's gaze stared straight at the huge axe. Immediately, his face was filled with shock and his entire body trembled. On that huge axe there was still half of Yu Qipeng's arm. It did not loosen from the handle at all because it was cut off. His 5 fingers were still tightly gripping the handle of the giant axe. It should have been covered in blood because half of his arm had been cut off. However, there was no trace of blood on that hand. Furthermore, it was pale and shriveled as though it was only skin wrapped around a few bones. Yu Qipeng's scalp tingled as goosebumps appeared all over his body. If he had continued to hold on to that giant axe, it wouldn't just be that half of his hand that had turned into a dried corpse. At this moment, how would Yu Qipeng dare to have any thoughts towards that giant axe? Looking at Yu Qipeng's expression, Yiqing Luo knew what he was thinking. She curled her lips in disdain, lowered her eyes again and reached for the giant axe. Little girl, wait. Suddenly an old voice came from behind. Soon after, she heard the sound of staggering footsteps approaching her step by step. Yiqing Luo's hand, which had yet to touch the huge axe, suddenly paused. She turned her head and saw Holy Pirate crawl out from the corner. He walked toward her with strange and comical steps. The people standing at the entrance of the secret room were startled. None of them realized that there was someone else in this secret room. Holy shit! Who was this filthy, stinky old man? His skin color was completely obscured by the filth on his body. Dark forces? Holy Pirate didn't bother about the gazes on him as he walked directly to Yiqing Luo's side and lifted his leg to kick the huge axe. Yiqing Luo tilted her head. You know? Holy Pirate didn't say a word. On that pitch-black face, Yiqing Luo couldn't tell what his current emotions were. Chapter 534. God Thief slowly squatted down. Although his action seemed stiff, but at least he squatted down. He stretched out his hand as he picked up the huge axe. When the huge axe was on the ground, other than feeling that the 5 withered fingers were a little strange, there wasn't anything else. But at this moment, the minute God Thief touched the huge axe, they saw a ball of black, the 5 fingers which were cut off from the long handle, charging directly towards God Thief's hand. The entire huge axe was instantly encircled by the black chi. God Thief. Yiqing Luo frowned as she berated. The feather fan in her hands swiftly waved towards that black chi. Wait a minute. God Thief's voice was gentle and calm. Yiqing Luo's actions stopped abruptly. Her brows creased as she looked at God Thief in puzzlement. But she saw God Thief's finger flicking lightly, and that ball of black chi seemed to have touched something terrifying as it speedily escaped. God Thief stretched out his other hand as he casually waved it on the huge axe. That ball of black chi was instantly dispersed. That half of the hand which was holding the long handle suddenly burnt into black ashes. A huge axe reverted back to its normal look. But, no matter how ordinary this huge axe's outer appearance was, but the scene of it forming bloodlines on Yu Qipeng's body, sucking Yu Qipeng's blood and then being enveloped by the extreme yin qi was still deeply rooted in everyone's mind. Keep it, we'll go back and research on it. God Thief passed the huge axe over to Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo was stunned as she immediately understood the reason why God Thief didn't allow her to touch the huge axe. After several rounds of understanding towards the dark force's energy, Yiqing Luo roughly knew that this gust of profound yin qi depended on something to survive, which was also the so-called host. Just like Yu Qipeng in his courtyard, he would be attached to by the profound yin qi, but he couldn't leave the courtyard. And this huge axe was the same. The profound yin qi was attached to the huge axe, and if Yiqing Luo had directly touched the huge axe, the next host which the black chi would attach to would be her. Why was God Thief not afraid of this energy at all? Dealing with it, he still looked as though he could do it with ease. This wasn't the time to ask questions, so Yiqing Luo didn't ask any further. She received the huge axe and placed it into the profound phoenix ring, and with her back facing God Thief, she squatted down. Qiao Jin walked in. Qing Luo, let me carry him, you lead the way. Holy Pirate did not hesitate. He jumped onto Qiao Jin's back. Young and strong lads make people feel at ease. Little girl, if I let you carry me any longer, this old man's bones will be burned by your bones. Hearing God Thief's words, Yiqing Luo's lips twitched as she rolled her eyes and walked past the crowd as she walked to the front, preparing to lead the way. Suddenly, a sharp whistle rang throughout the entire Death God Castle. The whistle was sharp, ear-piercing and deafening. Those with lower profound ranks immediately covered their ears and screamed in pain. Yiqing Luo's expression congealed. It's too late, the castle lord has taken action. Castle master? Yuchi Peng exclaimed. He had previously inquired about this mission and naturally understood the situation in Death God Castle. The castle lord of Death God Castle had always been a legend. Some even felt that the so-called castle lord totally didn't exist. The castle lord, in Yiqing Luo's words, was it really the castle lord of Death God Castle? Qing Luo, did you see Death God Castle's castle lord earlier? Yan Xiaoyi's brows creased slightly as she recalled the scene where Yiqing Luo passed the map to her and left alone. Are you all right? Chapter 535. Everyone was astonished. Especially the World Group's youngsters when they heard Yiqing Luo's words. They instantly became anxious. After all, in their hearts Yiqing Luo was the strongest among them. Yiqing Luo's invincibility was deeply ingrained in their hearts. He had totally forgotten that Yiqing Luo's profound grade was actually the lowest among the 20 over youngsters. Then what should we do? Qiao Jin turned around to look at the group of brothers behind him. In the Fort Master's territory, even if we wanted to leave secretly, I'm afraid it's impossible. Their whereabouts had been discovered. This also meant that as the castle master of Death God Castle, he could make use of the various formations or mechanisms in the castle to observe all of their actions. Yiqing Luo's fingers clenched tightly as her slender brows creased. Bring them along and follow the original route back. I'll attract them. No. This suggestion had just left Yiqing Luo's mouth when she was interrupted by Qiao Jin and Yan Xiaoyi at the same time. Yiqing Luo had already said that this castle lord was extremely dangerous. If Yiqing Luo was the only one who attracted the castle lord's attention, wouldn't that be pushing Yiqing Luo into the abyss of danger? Trust me, I'll be fine. Yiqing Luo summoned Shiju out from the pet space and flipped herself onto its back as she shook her head lightly. If we stay here, none of us will be able to walk out of Death God Castle. But after you guys leave Death God Castle, if I still haven't come out, look for Xian to save me. Yan Xiaoyi and Qiao Jin looked at each other. What Yiqing Luo said wasn't without reason. If they were to stay here, then no one would be able to leave Death God Castle alive. They might as well act separately. As long as they brought the Overlord over, they would definitely be able to save Yiqing Luo. What they needed to do now was to believe in Yiqing Luo. He trusted in her ability to survive. Qing Luo. Qiao Jin eventually pursed his lips as he called out Yiqing Luo's name. Yiqing Luo turned around. We believe in you, so stay alive and wait for us, for His Majesty. The petite figure sitting on Shiju's back stiffened slightly. Trust. These two words, ever since she entered the devil class, she had heard it a few times. She was very glad that she was allocated to the devil class, and was able to get to know this group of brothers. He had never felt so close to another person's heart. From the brothers of the devil class he could feel such a warm feeling in his heart. They saw her as their hope. And they were also her hope. Yiqing Luo's lips curled up into a smile filled with confidence. All right. She spat out a word from her pink lips. With that, the giant leopard beast beneath him moved its limbs and disappeared into the secret passage in the blink of an eye. The profound practitioners of the Iron Blood Warriors had been listening attentively to their conversation. After all, this group of people was their only hope of survival. Then when they heard them talking about asking Xian, or His Majesty, to save them, they were all dumbfounded. Dizun? Did they hear wrongly? How could these little kids be related to the high and mighty Dizun? But when he thought about it, these kids were talking to him about how to escape from Death God Castle. It wouldn't do them any good to mention Dizun for no reason. Moreover, the Dizun's name seemed to contain the word Xian. The Iron Blood Warriors candidates all drew in a breath of cold air as they suppressed the restlessness in their hearts. If these youngsters were really related to the Dizun, then they had almost killed all these youths just now. Chapter 536. Yiqing Luo, who was speedily rushing towards the direction of the whistle, didn't have the time to delve into the thoughts of the Iron Blood Warriors. She had to fight for time for her brothers to leave. If she didn't guess wrongly. Castle Lord had created such a huge commotion, it should be because of her. It wasn't that Yiqing Luo was narcissistic. But this Castle Lord. His attitude towards her was really as though he hadn't taken any medication. She only felt that the Castle Lord's face was rather familiar. But that didn't mean that she really knew him. Castle Lord had a "you dare to forget about me" expression, which made Yiqing Luo's heart filled with curses. In her mind, there really wasn't a single bit of memory regarding the Castle Lord. That astonishing, outstanding face, if they really had a deep relationship, Yiqing Luo would absolutely not forget about it. The whistle was getting nearer and nearer. Along the way, Yiqing Luo didn't intentionally avoid any arrays or mechanisms, directly passing through without any obstruction. She was even more certain of the guess in her heart. This Castle Lord's target was indeed her. He intentionally created such a commotion, just to lure her to look for him. In the long secret passage, a ray of light was faintly projected from the front. She was about to reach her destination. That destination which the Castle Lord had set for her. Yiqing Luo didn't have the slightest feeling of relief. Her heart was beating wildly. She frowned as she raised her hand and pressed it against her chest. The rate of her heartbeat was slightly hurried. She was nervous but also afraid. It had been a long time since she had such a feeling. The whistle sounded and it stopped. A creak sound was heard and the flickering door in front of her slowly opened just as Yiqing Luo approached it. A ray of bright light shot into Yiqing Luo's eyes. She raised her hand and blocked that ray of light. Squinting her eyes, she stared vigilantly at everything behind this door. Then he saw a figure standing against the light. A blood-red robe under the light seemed to be plated with a layer of gold, sparkling with luster. His black hair fluttered on his shoulders even though there was no wind. Looking from afar, Yiqing Luo felt the man's entire body emitting a chill. His eyes were filled with a chilly aura, staring straight at her. Yiqing Luo's heart trembled. Looking around, he didn't see anyone else. Yiqing Luo's brows creased tightly. That whistle just now, wasn't that the whistle to summon the guards of Death God Castle? How could this be? Yiqing Luo's expression suddenly sunk. You want to deal with my friend? The man who stood against the light took heavy steps towards Yiqing Luo. The cold air that came from his body assaulted her face. He lowered his eyes, his gaze cold and his tone overbearing. The safety of your friends depends on whether you listen to me or not. Her voice was cold and emotionless. But Yiqing Luo somehow heard a cool and wild feeling from it. Are you threatening me? Yiqing Luo raised her brows. She really couldn't figure out what the lord of the castle wanted to do. The Castle Lord raised his chin. He was indeed threatening Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo laughed involuntarily. Do you know that what I hate the most is threats? Her smile was like a flower, but it did not reach her eyes. Her voice paused and Yiqing Luo's figure moved. Her speed was extremely fast and in just an instant, the feather fan in her hands was aimed directly at the Castle Lord's chest. The Castle Lord dodged sideways. Following that, his long arms stretched out, grabbing Yiqing Luo's wrist. Using a little strength, Yiqing Luo's feet lost balance as she staggered and fell forward. Chapter 537. You still want to kill me? The icy cold words seemed to be squeezed out from the slits of his teeth, containing a thick grievance. Castle Lord's chilly eyes were filled with an intense chill as he stared at Yiqing Luo sinisterly. That gaze seemed to want to tear Yiqing Luo into pieces, but it concealed some other emotions. It was so complicated that Yiqing Luo couldn't understand it at all. To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. If I catch you, would I still be afraid of those guards stopping my brothers? Yiqing Luo calmly met Castle Lord's sharp gaze, not concealing her own thoughts at all. Yiqing Luo. Castle Lord flew into a rage out of humiliation as he bellowed. The cold and arrogant face of the wooden man twisted a little. Yiqing Luo's brows creased even tighter. From this look, Castle Lord's face seemed even more familiar. Where on earth had she seen this face before? Suddenly, Yiqing Luo had a flash of inspiration as she suddenly thought of something. You are that chilly expression and sharp gaze young man. Upon hearing Yiqing Luo's words, the cold lines on his face instantly softened. He stretched out his hand and his cold fingers lifted Yiqing Luo's lower jaw. He forced her gaze to meet his. That pair of malicious eyes faintly sparkled with a ray of hope. You've recalled. His tone was filled with joy. Yiqing Luo frowned, thinking of him made him so happy? Only in her memory she didn't feel that she knew him. Yiqing Luo pursed her lips as she tried to probe. Have you been to Heavenly Academy before? The glow in the young man's eyes darkened. After some time he nodded his head. Then if I didn't remember wrongly, have we met at Heavenly Academy's novice training grounds? Yiqing Luo added another sentence to probe. At that time she was at the training grounds, following the instructor's instructions training. She felt someone staring at her and casually glanced over. It seemed that this castle lord was among those few masters. She even used his face to compare with Zhou Xian. Only she didn't put that episode in her heart, so naturally she didn't remember that young man. Wasn't it normal to not recognize him when she saw him? Yiqing Luo was really in a daze. The cold fingers on her chin suddenly tightened their grip, causing her to frown and suck in a breath of cold air from the pain. Damn it! Was it acting up again? A cold glint flashed past Yiqing Luo's charming eyes. Profound chi palm wind stirred and profound chi broke out of her body. Her palm was wrapped in a ball of red light as she swung it straight at the castle lord's chest. However, the castle lord had no intention of dodging. He pinched Yiqing Luo's lower jaw like that, as though a wild beast staring at its prey, staring at her without blinking. Yiqing Luo's palm strike landed directly on his chest. His expression did not change in the slightest. Only his slender body stiffened for a moment. A shallow, muffled groan escaped from his nostrils. The castle lord's face became even colder. Yiqing Luo was cursing in her heart. What kind of mental illness was this? He would rather be beaten than let go of her. Her palm strike was merciless. If it was any other lower profound grade cultivator, their internal organs would be affected by this palm strike. But he didn't even change his expression. On the contrary, his fingers clenched even tighter. The piercing pain from her lower jaw made Yiqing Luo feel that her lower jawbone was about to be crushed by him. But this young man was stubborn. Even if it was a head-on clash, he refused to let go. Yiqing Luo's reaction made the whirlpool in the young man's eyes surge even more intensely. His thin lips curled into an extremely shallow arc as he spat out a sentence coldly. My name is Zhu Wu Exen from now onwards, you better remember this name. Chapter 538. In front of her eyes, that cold and aloof face gradually enlarged in her pupils. Damn it! Did the scene need to suddenly become so strange? What was going on with this cool mad battle style? Molesting her just because of a disagreement? Yiqing Luo's palm wind rose again. This palm strike of hers wasn't aimed towards the castle lord's chest. But it was directly aimed towards the castle lord's face. At the same time she raised her leg and kicked towards the man's weakest spot. However, the castle lord seemed to have guessed her actions as his slender long legs pressed down on Yiqing Luo's legs as he locked both of her hands. His thin lips and Yiqing Luo's were separated by a finger's distance. Ow! A beast's cry was heard, and immediately following that, a white figure flashed past. Yiqing Luo only felt something furry covering her face. The castle lord's hand left the restraint on her. His slender body took a step back. Yiqing Luo, who had released the restraint, speedily hugged the little furry ball on her face as she retreated out of the castle lord's attack range. Little Nine. This little furry ball wasn't anyone else but the nine-tailed fox. Little Nine's sharp mouth stuck close to Yiqing Luo's face. Only this time it wasn't licking her face like usual. Instead it revealed its sharp teeth and bit her. Little Nine controlled his strength, but Yiqing Luo still felt a piercing pain. Little Nine was angry. Zhou Xian passed Little Nine to her so that he could protect her in Death God Castle. But unfortunately Yiqing Luo left Little Nine outside Death God Castle. Alright, Little Nine, it's my fault. Luckily you came over in time to save me. Yiqing Luo rubbed the area where she was bitten and rubbed its little head as her eyes were covered with a layer of warmth. Humph. Little Nine turned its head away as its little emotions started to surge up. It felt that its future mistress didn't trust its ability. Although it couldn't be compared to future mistress's white tiger sacred beast, but at least it was the one and only nine-tailed fox sacred beast. Look, it just didn't catch up to her, and future mistress was almost kissed by another man. If Master knew that Master couldn't bear to vent his anger on his future mistress, he would definitely vent his anger on it. The pitch-black fox eyes of Little Nine formed a long and narrow arc, fiercely glaring at Shiju, who was sitting up straight. He was simply about to vomit blood. Seeing his master being molested by another man, he did not step forward to help his master. Shiju blinked its bell-like eyes innocently, not understanding why the nine-tailed fox's eyes were filled with contempt. It raised its claws and scratched its ears, looking confused. It was hard for Shiju not to understand. Shiju's age as a mirage beast was equivalent to a 6 or 7-year-old child. Other than obeying the orders of its master, it did not have the intelligence to act on its own and distinguish right from wrong. The atmosphere between the two beasts and the man was extremely harmonious. The castle lord who had his face scratched by Little Nine earlier touched the blood stains on his face as his sinister eagle-like black eyes stared coldly at Yiqing Luo. She smiled at a small battle pet and her side profile with gentle lines. An indescribable rage surged from the bottom of his heart. Why couldn't she show such an expression in front of him? Obviously. In the past she would smile at him. But now in her eyes he totally didn't exist. She would rather place her vision on a little fur ball than to look at him. Little Nine, who had shrunk into Yiqing Luo's palm and was nibbling on her finger to show that he was angry, suddenly felt his hair stand up as his little body trembled. Chapter 539. Yiqing Luo followed Little Nine's line of sight and realized that the castle lord was still standing by the side. Her slender brows creased slightly. "What on earth are you trying to do? Remember me." 3 emotionless words came out of his mouth. Yiqing Luo was really about to throw up blood. Hadn't she already remembered him? Could it be that they had met before at the freshman training grounds? She really didn't have any impression at all. Wait a minute. Yiqing Luo suddenly thought of something as her slender brows creased even tighter. Zhu Wu Exen? Zhu. Master Chu? Yiqing Luo's expression suddenly congealed as her eyes were filled with puzzlement. You are that Master Chu? Earlier when she was forcibly molested by him, she didn't notice that Zhu Wu Exen had said his own name. Now that she thought about it, she recalled that not long ago, Master Chu had sent his followers to send her medicine and pills. As well as the Elder Quarter's Grand Elder who mentioned Master Chu. It was him. Yes. Zhu Wu Exen replied decisively. I thought you haven't forgotten about me. Yiqing Luo remained silent. In her memories, there really wasn't any memory of Zhu Wu Exen. She had completely merged with this body and all the memories were clearly remembered in her mind. She was 100% sure that she really didn't know Zhu Wu Exen. Had Zhu Wu Exen recognized the wrong person? Yiqing Luo. While she remained silent, Zhu Wu Exen took a step towards her. Little Nine, who was in her arms, instantly leapt onto the ground. A ball of dazzling light shone and Little Nine's figure became extremely huge as he bared his fangs and stared at this young man who was approaching his future mistress with ill intentions. Those 9 tails swayed as it blocked Yiqing Luo completely. Zhu Wu Exion's footsteps halted as that expressionless face turned extremely ugly. His eyes overflowed with a thick murderous intent. How dare you? Yiqing Luo's expression sunk as her footwork moved and she dashed in front of Little Nine. Danger. This Zhu Wu Exen was extremely dangerous. The murderous intent which appeared in his eyes represented that he really wanted to kill Little Nine. He was simply a lunatic. Yiqing Luo, follow me, I can let these people go. The lingering murderous intent in Zhu Wu Exion's eyes slowly disappeared under Yiqing Luo's low growl. That pair of calm eagle eyes stared fixedly at her. Yiqing Luo frowned slightly. Go with him. Yiqing Luo was certain that she had never met Zhu Wu Exen before. However, she definitely could not say that Zhu Wuxin might have mistaken her for someone else. Zhu Wu Exion's emotions were unstable and he was temperamental, sometimes gloomy, sometimes expressionless, so Yiqing Luo really couldn't grasp his temperament. If Zhu Wuxin found out that he had recognized the wrong person, it was very likely that he would kill her without hesitation. The Brothers of the World group would also suffer a calamity. She pursed her lips, feeling a little vexed. If she could be a little stronger, she wouldn't be afraid of Zhu Wuxin's power. This feeling was really depressing. She clenched her fists tightly as her mind raced, trying to think of a way to stall for time. As long as the World Group's brothers left Death God Castle, she had the confidence to escape from Death God Castle. As the saying goes, the ancients have said, I am a girl who knows when to yield and when to stand tall. Her silence made Zhu Wu Exen even more irritated and impatient. He might as well walk towards Yiqing Luo directly as his gaze was icy cold and malicious. Before little Nine was able to stop him, Zhu Wuxian had already stretched out his hand towards Yiqing Luo's shoulder. "Follow me." Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as she avoided his hand. Her body retreated by half a step, but she bumped into a thick meat wall. Chapter 540. This wall of flesh was extremely thick and warm, emitting a soothing sandalwood fragrance. That strong and powerful arm wrapped tightly around her waist. Yiqing Luo's heart gradually calmed down. "Ah, Xian." Yiqing Luo's eyes sparkled with joy as she swiftly turned around and threw herself into the man's arms. He actually came. "It's Xiao Yi and the others. They're fine." Dmo Xian's large palm stroked Yiqing Luo's hair as his fingertips twirled a lock of hair, gently fiddling with it. "The Imperial Palace's disciples have already brought them back safely." The Imperial Palace? Yiqing Luo was stunned as she raised her head to look at that peerless face. After a while she revealed a smile that could topple cities. Her arms encircled Dmo Xian's waist. Her face was plastered tightly against Dmo Xian's chest, listening to his heartbeat, smelling his scent. A sweet sense of satisfaction slowly flowed in his heart. The reason why Dmo Xian appeared here was not because Qiao Jin and the others had left Death God Castle in time and called for Dmo Xian. Instead he was worried about her. Hence, after she and her brothers entered the Death God Castle, she gathered the Monarch Palace's disciples and waited outside. Dmo Xian let her do what she wanted to do, but unbeknownst to her, he had made preparations for the worst outcome. "You don't blame me?" Dmo Xian lowered his eyes to look at the little person in his arms as his lips curled into a faint arc. His eyes were filled with love. "Why would I blame you?" Yiqing Luo rubbed her face against his chest. "I know you're worried about me. There's always a chance." Just like now, Yiqing Luo had met Zhu Wuxian. The world group suffered a sneak attack from the Iron Blood Warriors. If Dmo Xian had not appeared, the situation today would be totally different. "I thought you don't want to rely on others." Dmo Xian's eyes were filled with tenderness as he hugged the woman in his arms tightly. Looking at her, Dmo Xian knew that she was not injured. Fortunately, she had protected herself well. He thought that Yiqing Luo would be angry, because this unique girl wouldn't rely on anyone. Yiqing Luo's eyes were filled with gentleness as her heart was fiercely touched. She raised her head and met his long and narrow peach blossom eyes. Her voice was gentle as she said word by word, "But you're not someone else." Yes, she did not want to rely on others. Because in this world the only reliable person was himself. However, Dmo Xian was different. She was willing to hand over her back to Dmo Xian and was willing to rely on Dmo Xian. This man would be her future husband. She should learn to rely on him. What's more, this man's intentions were all for her. How could she bear to be angry and blame him? "Good, very good, aha. Yiqing Luo, good job." Broken laughter came one after another. Zhu Wuxian smiled as he slowly retreated. He pointed at Yiqing Luo and Dmo Xian, with an expression of a husband caught in the act, his eagle eyes filled with agony. "You purposely pretended to forget about me and hooked up with another man, Yiqing Luo? To think that I've been thinking about you for so many years." The two's tender feelings were interrupted by this sharp laughter. When Dmo Xian heard Zhu Wuxian's accusations, he lowered his eyes towards Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo had a puzzled look as she shook her head. So many years. Many years. What kind of joke was he cracking? She wasn't even 15 years old yet. Before this, based on her reputation as a waste, it was impossible for her to know such an incredible figure like Zhu Wuxian. Chapter 541. Zhu Wuxian. With Dmo Xian by her side, Yiqing Luo naturally had no worries. Just as he was about to tell her that Zhu Wuxian had mistaken him for someone else, he saw the youth in the red robe's sleeves flutter in the wind. A powerful burst of profound energy burst out of his body. Streams of profound energy turned into countless sharp blades. In an instant, the entire space was filled with cold light. Covering the sky and covering the earth, it shot towards Yiqing Luo and Dmo Xian's direction. Yiqing Luo's waist tightened as Dmo Xian grabbed her and swiftly retreated. Soon after, he lifted his sleeves and a powerful whirlwind instantly scattered those sharp blades. Boom, boom, boom. A deafening explosion sounded. Countless deep pits were blasted into the ground. Gravel flew in all directions and smoke rose in spirals. Yiqing Luo was pulled behind Zhou Xian as her charming eyes widened, looking at this scene in astonishment. Just how strong was her man? Zhou Xian had never released his profound grade in front of her. She only knew that as the legend of Nirvana realm, Zhou Xian, who was revered by everyone, was very strong. But to what extent she did not know. However, she knew that Zhou Wuxing was very strong. At the very least, if she were to fight with Zhou Wuxing, she would definitely not be able to gain any advantage. There was a high chance that he would be injured. Whereas under Zhou Wuxian's rage, he brought along a maniacal intent of destroying anything that he couldn't obtain. The profound qi that he released was actually suppressed back by Zhou Xian with a casual wave of his sleeves. It was enough to show that Zhou Xian's profound grade was at least one level higher than Zhou Wuxian. Zhou Wuxing also realized this point. He was forced to retreat a few steps by Zhou Xian's counterattack and barely managed to stabilize his footsteps. He narrowed his eagle-like eyes and there was a cold glint in them. If he were to go all out, he might not be Zhou Xian's opponent. But Zhou Wuxian's vision fell onto Yiqing Luo. Those deep eyes that were sealed in ice for 3 feet stared deeply at her. As though he wanted to use that layer of frost to seal Yiqing Luo completely. After a while, Zhou Wuxing clenched his fists. Forget it. Anyway, he had already found Yiqing Luo and he had waited for so many years, so a little while more wouldn't make a difference. One day he would make Yiqing Luo admit personally that she remembered him. Yiqing Luo, you can forget about escaping from me. After saying this, the corners of Zhou Wuxing's mouth twitched coldly. With a leap, he disappeared from the secret room. That sentence was like an icy cold venomous snake, tightly coiling around Yiqing Luo. She couldn't help but shiver. Touching her own arm, she inched closer to Zhou Xian's arms, her face turned slightly gloomy. He can't be serious, right? You and him, I've only seen him once. Yiqing Luo didn't hesitate to interrupt his words and immediately explained, only when we were at the Heavenly Academy's freshman training grounds. He was on the 2nd floor and I was on the 1st floor. We just took a casual glance and didn't even say a word. Zhou Xian lowered his head and gently caressed her face. I didn't suspect you. Yiqing Luo's gaze towards Zhou Wuxian was very unfamiliar. Especially when she heard Zhou Wuxing's expression as if she had caught her husband in the act. She was filled with helplessness and confusion. Zhou Xian naturally believed in Yiqing Luo's memory. If he had really met Zhou Wuxing and had a deep relationship with him, he would definitely remember him. It's good that you believe me. I also don't know why he's so certain that I'm the person he's looking for. Moreover, Zhou Wuxian had accurately called out her name. Her lower jaw was abruptly lifted up by Zhou Xian. Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased slightly. Her lower jaw was clasped by Zhou Wuxian earlier and it was still aching. Sensing Yiqing Luo's expression, Zhou Xian immediately released his hand. Chapter 542. I'm fine. Yiqing Luo closed his palm as her charming eyes were filled with smiles. Not painful. But I'm in pain. Zhou Xian's long arms suddenly exerted strength as he held her delicate body tightly. The man's head was buried in the crook of her neck. His eyelashes were very long and dense. As he shook, it was like a feather brushing past her skin, causing her to shiver slightly. Lil Luo, or do you know my heart will ache? The man's deep voice was like a mellow whine as it seeped into her ears. The smile on Yiqing Luo's lips slowly congealed by the side of her lips. The expression on her face started to loosen. His words intoxicated her heart. When had there ever been such a person who would feel heartache for her pain? When had there ever been such a person who treated her like a treasure? How fortunate was she to meet a person who loved her so much? Yiqing Luo blinked as her curly long eyelashes were stained with some moisture. Her hands cupped Zhou Xian's face as she proactively offered her pink lips. That slightly moist eyelashes cast a circle of shadow on her eyelids. It accentuated that elegant and exquisite face, making one's heart flutter. Zhou Xian was stunned as he immediately regained his senses as his large palm locked onto the back of Yiqing Luo's head as he deepened the kiss. Only this kiss had just ignited. That tightly shut door was suddenly pushed open as a loud and clear voice rang. Castle Lord, it's bad. Death God Castle has suffered a heavy blow. After the guard rushed into the secret room, he discovered. Where was his Castle Lord's shadow in the secret room? Who was this pair of lovers who couldn't bear to part from each other as they kissed? They even arranged a date to Death God Castle? Their guts were just too big. Before the guard could blow the whistle on his chest, his body suddenly felt light as he was sent flying. Zhou Xian's face was steely green as his discontented eyes were dyed black as he stared coldly at that guard. That damned fellow. He actually dared to disturb him and Lil Luo's tenderness at such a crucial moment. He finally waited for Lil Luo to take the initiative. At this moment Zhou Xian even had the intention to kill that guard. Death God Castle was overwhelmed by the appearance of the Arch Palace's disciples. Yan Shaoyi and the rest took advantage of the chaos and successfully left Death God Castle with the help of the Imperial Palace disciples. This battle lasted for an entire 6 hours before it finally came to a stop. Whereas 6 hours later Yiqing Luo and the others had already returned to the mansion. And in these 6 hours, the news regarding Death God Castle had already spread through the streets and alleys. It was said that Death God Castle suffered heavy casualties in this battle. However, the Emperor Palace's disciples didn't enter the Death God Castle to steal anything. After the fight, the Emperor Palace's disciples waved their sleeves and left. It was completely as though the Emperor Palace was purposely finding fault with the Death God Castle. Sitting in the main hall, Yiqing Luo couldn't help but laughed out loud when she heard the news that Xiao Jin had inquired about. Death God Castle was famous for its internal mechanisms and arrays. Those guards might have been considered experts in the past. However, 10 years ago Saint Thief had fallen in Death God Castle. Hence, very few people would attempt to barge into Death God Castle. This kind of peaceful days had long steadied those guards' temperaments. Moreover, that day Zhu Wuxia wasn't present in Death God Castle, so the guards' morale was low. Naturally, they couldn't win against the brave Emperor Palace's disciples. But this battle went on for 6 hours. She assumed that Zhou Xian was jealous because of Zhu Wuxian's matter? Otherwise, after she and the World Group's brothers left Death God Castle safely, the Emperor Palace should have retracted their troops. This man acted as though he didn't care at all in front of her. But in actual fact she still felt disgusted. Chapter 543. Oh hey, now we're talking about proper business. Can you not put on that, I'm very blissful, expression? Xiao Jin sat on the chair by the side as he covered his eyes and cried out exaggeratedly. Looking at Yiqing Luo's smile, that was called 1,000 dainty and 100 enchanting, her eyes filled with tenderness. It was simply blinding, his titanium alloy dog eyes all right. The few brothers beside him all laughed out secretly. Yiqing Luo regained her senses and on seeing her brother's mischievous smiles, her cheeks blushed red instantly. She then turned her head to look at Zhou Xian, who had already changed his appearance. That pair of peach blossom eyes were filled with smiles. Yiqing Luo flew into a rage out of embarrassment as she bit her lips angrily and stared fiercely at him, immediately putting on a solemn expression. Let's talk about proper business, let's talk about proper business. Everyone in the main hall immediately laughed out loudly. Xiao Jin was especially exaggerated as he stood up and laughed out loud. Usually he was used to seeing Yiqing Luo's straightforward side and occasionally seeing her revealing this coquettish look because of Zhou Xian. He couldn't bear it. Everyone laughed out loud while Long Yunzhan, who was sitting beside Xiao Jin, was still expressionless as he stared coldly at Yu Qiping, who was sitting opposite him. This was the mansion where the World Group gathered. Because of this, Xiao Jin only allowed Yu Qiping's 2 trusted aides and that Duke Jing to accompany Yu Qiping into the mansion. In the entire main hall there were 60 over people. Only Yu Qiping, there were only 4 of them. Yu Qiping was filled with apprehension as he was so nervous that his entire body's muscles were taut. The area where his right hand was severed was also twitching in pain because of the taut muscles. No matter how arrogant Duke Jing was usually, he wasn't an idiot. Now that he was in someone else's territory and the surrounding people all looked not to be trifled with. Especially when he saw that Yiqing Luo, who totally disregarded his identity at the Mercenary Association that day, he didn't say a single word. He had been listening to these youngsters talking about their own matters. When Duke Jing heard Yiqing Luo laughing, his gaze subconsciously turned towards Yiqing Luo. In his heart, this woman was totally not an ordinary woman. Which lady was as fierce as her? But at this glance he saw Yiqing Luo smiling like a flower. Her curved eyes were filled with happiness and sweetness. This smile was bright and radiant. It was like a flaming rose slowly blooming. In a split second, Duke Jing only felt that his heart was thumping non-stop. She was so beautiful. Uncle Monarch had bestowed him with many beauties, but none of those ladies in the residence could be compared to 1/10,000th of Yiqing Luo. He recalled her domineering and awe-inspiring appearance that day at the mercenary guild. Suddenly, he felt that only such a woman was worthy of his distinguished status. Duke Jing. A stern voice rang in his ears. Duke Jing suddenly raised his head and saw a pair of icy-cold eyes. His eyes were different from ordinary people. It was a pair of azure eyes that were as blue as the sea and sky, and they were suffused with a piercingly cold light. It was as if she could see through his soul from the bottom of his eyes. Duke Jing shuddered as he stood up. I'm here. This interlude made everyone's gazes in the main hall gather onto Duke Jing. Duke Jing felt a chill down his spine as his head was filled with cold sweat. What's wrong? He spoke, his voice trembling. The World Group's group leader's gaze was simply too icy cold. As though he had seen through his thoughts towards Yiqing Luo. Duke Jing hated this feeling. Chapter 544. Eldest young Master Yuqi said that he would make a deal with the dark forces, and you're the one who introduced him. Yiqing Luo casted a glance at him as she spoke out calmly. Dark forces? When Duke Jing heard that, his expression instantly turned flustered as he subconsciously turned around and wanted to leave. The youngsters who were standing at the entrance all stood up one by one, forming a meat wall. These youngsters' faces were still slightly immature. But that imposing manner pressured Duke Jing so much that he retreated a few steps. Tell me, how did you get in touch with the dark forces? Why did you make me make a deal with the dark forces? Yuqi Peng saw the atmosphere turning stiff as he bore with the intense pain in his wrist as he turned his head and stared at Duke Jing. The reason why he ended up with an ending where his right hand was chopped off was all because of Duke Jing. If it wasn't for Duke Jing who pulled him along to make some soul deal with the dark forces, he wouldn't have been swallowed so badly. If it wasn't for the fact that he met Yiqing Luo by now, he would have turned into a dried corpse. A dried corpse which had been swallowed by the dark forces. Because of this, when Yiqing Luo and Xiao Jin interrogated him about the dark forces, he didn't hesitate to say out Duke Jing's name. Yiqing Luo saved Yuqi Peng and brought the Iron Blood warriors out from Death God Castle. The motive was to find out the news about the dark forces from his mouth. She wondered if it was her misperception. Somehow she felt that the dark forces' target seemed to be her. Around her there were more and more people who made deals with the dark forces. Peng, you promised this Duke that you will not betray me. Duke Jing's face was steely green as he returned to his own seat under the coercion of the bunch of youngsters. Yuqi Peng gave a cold harumph. You also swore that it's just a deal and that it wouldn't affect my life. Do you know that I was almost swallowed by this strange energy today? No, impossible. Duke Jing's eyes widened. That's something which can borrow your energy, how could it be swallowed? His words paused as he lowered his head to look at Yuqi Peng's bandaged-up hand which was obviously chopped off. His body started to tremble uncontrollably. No wonder. Those cultivators who came back alive from Death God Castle carried him on their shoulders all the way to this huge mansion. On the way, he also heard about the matter of Yuqi Peng's hand being chopped off. Those profound practitioners spoke very vaguely. Duke Jing roughly understood that it was Yuqi Peng's huge axe which was attached by the black qi and almost swallowed Yuqi Peng. Whereas Yiqing Luo used her fan to chop off Yuqi Peng's hand before she managed to escape from that huge axe's devouring. Then Duke Jing, how did you get in touch with the dark forces and how did you make the deal with them? Looking at Duke Jing's expression, Yiqing Luo knew that he understood what had happened as her lips curled into a smile which didn't look like a smile. This smile was different from the radiant smile just now. Duke Jing's entire body turned icy cold as he felt goosebumps all over as his heart was filled with fear. When he raised his eyes to look at Yiqing Luo, her half-squinted eyes reflected a sharp glint, as though it had pierced into his chest. Duke Jing's but fell onto the chair. This king also doesn't know. Yiqing Luo raised her brows as her smile gradually turned cold. This king really doesn't know. This king has never made a deal with the dark forces before. Duke Jing hugged his head as he shook his head furiously. This king only heard that the dark forces' energy can raise one's power. As long as you give enough souls, the dark forces will help you to fulfill all your wishes. Chapter 545. As the old general's son, Duke Jing was later brought back to the palace by the monarch and was pampered endlessly. Although under the doting of the monarch, this general's son had become completely useless. But the bloodline of a general was still the bloodline of a general. Duke Jing assumed that since he was the general's son, he should have the same lofty sentiments as his father. Especially after hearing the evaluation of him from the people outside the palace when he was visiting women. Duke Jing wanted to make a name for himself even more, to prove that he wasn't a mediocre person, to fiercely slap those people's faces. It was also at this time that he met Yu Qipeng. After getting to know Yu Qipeng, he was infected by Yu Qipeng's lofty sentiments and persistence towards his dreams. He wholeheartedly treated Yu Qipeng as his own brother. Yu Qipeng also chatted happily with him. He thought that Yu Qipeng was talented, brave and intelligent. Even if he did not have the title of prince, he would still be able to become an overlord. The two of them hit it off immediately. He wanted to form a mercenary group together. Yu Qipeng was the leader and was in charge of everything on the surface. Whereas Duke Jing was in charge of the mercenary group's internal affairs, which was to be a money tree. Seeing the Iron Blood warriors getting stronger and stronger, Duke Jing seemed to be able to see himself standing at the highest level of the mercenary group, with a wave of his arm and tens of thousands of people responding to him. The hot blood in his heart was ignited by Yu Qipeng. He kept urging Yu Qipeng to establish a mercenary guild. But Yu Qipeng always used the reason that the current strength of the mercenary group was not strong enough and they were unable to upgrade the mercenary group in the shortest time possible to reject him. He watched as the predators grew stronger and stronger. There were already 5,000 of them, and they had taken over the market that the mercenary union had to pass through, becoming the local tyrant. Duke Jing was delighted with himself. Just as Duke Jing was anxious to establish a mercenary group to flaunt his ability to Uncle Monarch, Yu Qipeng finally nodded his head and agreed to head to the Mercenary Association to register the mercenary group. However, Yu Qipeng made a request. Yu Qipeng hoped to use Duke Jing's name to gather some earth-profound and above cultivators with extremely fast speed, and to recruit a large number of thieves. He said it was for the development of the mercenary group. Duke Jing had always listened to whatever Yu Qipeng said. When he heard that it was for the sake of the mercenary group, he didn't think too much about it. Without saying a word to Uncle June, he set up a table at the entrance of the mansion and gathered the thieves and cultivators. It was at this moment that the dark forces came looking for them. It was a man wearing a black cloak from head to toe. The figure was stooped and the voice was hoarse and ear-piercing. It was impossible to tell the gender of the black-cloaked man. The black-cloaked man directly invited Duke Jing, wanting to discuss a deal with him. The black-cloaked man told him that the reason why Yu Qipeng was looking for bandits was to enter Death God Castle and complete a mercenary group mission. If he was willing to use his soul as a trade, the black-cloaked man would give them enough power to complete the task and raise their profound rank. Yu Qipeng immediately nodded in agreement. He had always been bold and arrogant, thinking that with Uncle June around, the entire West continent would have to give him face. Naturally, he didn't think that someone would lie to him. He was willing to use his soul as a trade to increase his strength and complete the mercenary group's first mission. Unexpectedly, the black-cloaked man rejected the deal on the grounds that his soul was too weak. Hence Duke Jing brought Yu Qipeng over. As the eldest young master of an aristocratic family, Yu Qipeng had been nurtured as the future patriarch of the Yuqi family since he was young, so his soul power wasn't low. The strong all thirsted for power. Chapter 546. What? When Yu Qipeng heard that, he stood up in shock. As he was overly agitated, the chair beside his legs was overturned onto the ground. A deathly aura appeared on his pale face. After some time he suddenly laughed out loudly. He laughed until his entire body was twitching as he stared at Duke Jing's eyes, but it was filled with sorrow and emptiness. Yiqing Luo frowned slightly but didn't interrupt Yu Qipeng's crazy laughter. Until Yu Qipeng couldn't catch his breath from laughing so hard as he couldn't stop coughing. He coughed as his legs were unstable as he fell onto the ground. He didn't get up as he just laid on the ground with his four limbs spread out. Yiqing Luo poured a cup of tea as she slowly got up and walked to his side, passing the water to him. Yu Qipeng, who was lying on the ground, didn't bother about the cup in front of him. His gaze was still empty as his lips curled into a smile. Do you know, the one who told me that the Mercenary Association would issue this high-grade rare mission that day was someone from the Dark Forces. When he said that, the entire hall fell into a dead silence. The cup in Yiqing Luo's hand shook as she frowned and speedily placed the cup aside as she grabbed Yu Qipeng's collar. "What did you say?" Black-cloaked man, stooped figure, ear-piercing voice, unable to differentiate gender. Word by word he repeated what Duke Jing had said earlier. Following that, his pale lips trembled. "It's this black-cloaked man who told me that the Mercenary Association would issue a mission to head to Death God Castle to steal the exquisite pagoda, and Duke Jing would help me to complete the mission safely." "Didn't Duke Jing bring you to do a deal with the dark forces? Haven't you seen the black-cloaked man?" Yiqing Luo's brows creased suspiciously. Earlier Yu Qipeng's performance was that he totally didn't know what the dark forces were. Moreover, Yu Qipeng was the future patriarch of the Yuqi family. If he had seen the black-cloaked man and told him about this mission, why would he sign a soul deal with the black-cloaked man through Duke Jing? Based on Yu Qipeng's intelligence, he naturally knew that something was amiss. Yu Qipeng's left hand's fingers clenched tightly into a fist. The smile on his face slowly turned into pain. The thirst for power had blinded his eyes. It was also because he was too confident, believing in his own ability and also believing that under his influence, Duke Jing wouldn't have the guts to lie to him. He had never seen the so-called Dark Force emissary. Everything was done through Duke Jing. Everyone fell silent. Yu Qipeng was directly brought over from Death God Castle. After that he asked the Iron Blood warriors to bring Duke Jing to exchange for Yu Qipeng. The two of them had no chance to collude in advance. After all, Yu Qipeng had always believed in the Dark Force's energy and had always believed that as long as the Dark Force's energy was attached to him, not to mention one Yiqing Luo, even if 10 of them came, he wasn't afraid at all. Furthermore, Yu Qipeng's appearance did not seem to be faking it. When the words of these two people were combined, it was a huge conspiracy. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes as she stared at Yu Qipeng, whose face was ashen as she raised her voice. "Jin Zi, arrange a few brothers to send eldest young Master Yuqi and Duke Jing back to the Iron Blood warriors first." After Yu Qipeng and Duke Jing were sent away, Long Yunzhan's dull azure blue eyes looked towards Yiqing Luo. "This Dark Force's motive is directed at you?" Yiqing Luo returned to her own seat and sat down as she nodded her head with a grave expression. "I also have this feeling." Linking Yu Qipeng and Duke Jing's words together, it was obvious that there was a pair of invisible hands behind the scenes, pushing the development of the plan. Chapter 547. Then, the person who issued the exquisite pagoda's mission, could it be? Xiao Jin suddenly stood up as his index finger trembled. "I've thought of many ways to investigate this person, but to no avail." "There's a possibility of this." Yiqing Luo nodded. If Yu Qipeng and Duke Jing were just a chess piece in the Dark Force's hands, then the so-called exquisite pagoda could possibly be a chess piece of the Dark Forces. Otherwise, how could it be so coincidental? Just when she was leading her group to register for the mercenary group, she coincidentally met the Iron Blood warriors. Wait. Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased as her expression turned slightly grave. "How did the Dark Forces know that I want to establish a mercenary group?" The minute this question was raised, the entire hall's atmosphere turned solemn. 60 over youngsters looked at each other in dismay as they realized the seriousness of the problem. Their whereabouts. They were being monitored by the so-called Dark Forces? If this was really the case, that would be too terrifying. The youngsters had goosebumps all over as they couldn't help but rub their arms. Not exactly. Zhou Xian's brows rose as his ordinary-looking face made that pair of peach blossom eyes look even shinier. The Dark Forces can appear beside you without any trace, so naturally they have their own forces in the academy. Yiqing Luo nodded her head in enlightenment. Her eyes suddenly shone as though she thought of something. Dark Forces. That day she was on the second floor of the library pavilion when she eavesdropped on the conversation between the director and the so-called guardian. Recalling the guardian mentioning about the freshman, and the director mentioned that he kept a tight watch on the freshman. Could it be that the lord mentioned by the guardian, that guardian was someone from the Dark Forces? This thought shocked Yiqing Luo so much that her expression turned extremely grave. If the director listened to the Dark Forces, then Heavenly Academy would be in trouble. Seeing Yiqing Luo's expression changing, Zhou Xian leaned over and caressed her forehead, which was oozing with cold sweat. "What did you think of?" "Oh, nothing." Yiqing Luo brushed his hand away as her back felt a chill. She slowly shook her head. These were only her guesses and there was no evidence to prove it. There might be a problem with the director, but he had after all been the director of Heavenly Academy for over 10 years. Furthermore, from the short interaction with the director, he had a huge ambition. And he liked the feeling of standing on a high position overlooking others. Without the Heavenly Academy he was nothing. No matter what, he wouldn't do anything detrimental to the Academy. Thinking in this way, Yiqing Luo threw this thought to the back of her head. What you mean is, if the dark force's target is me, the other party will definitely guess that I won't stay in the Yi family during the holidays. The Yi family had Yiqing Jian. Yiqing Qian had already made a deal with the dark forces. She had once mentioned in the Yi family that during the 3 days of holidays, she would be going out to play with the devil class students. Presumably, Yiqing Qian would inform the dark forces of this news. The dark forces made use of Yu Qipeng's Iron Blood Warriors, just to let Yiqing Luo's group go against the Iron Blood Warriors. Then, did the dark forces know that the World group were students from the devil class? What was the purpose of the underground forces doing this? Countless doubts were surging in his mind. A large palm covered her head. Zhou Xian had unknowingly stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, the other hand caressing her hair. The warm and thick palm, the soothing sandalwood scent enveloped Yiqing Luo. Chapter 548. Control her. Yiqing Luo's brows creased into a bundle as she turned her head to look at Zhou Xian behind her. Why? The motive is still unclear, but from this series of events, the dark force's motive is definitely to control you. Zhou Xian analyzed, since the ability assessment, that woman holding the profound Yin sword and later on Yiqing Qian, they had all made a deal with the dark forces and wanted to provoke your anger so that the dark force's profound Yin qi would be transferred to you. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as she thought carefully. It seemed that it was indeed so. If it was said that Yiqing Ling and Yiqing Qian had no choice but to make a deal with the dark forces in order to gain a foothold in the Yi family, it could also be said that the dark force's scope was too wide and she had seen 2 of them around her. Then now, Yu Qipeng and Duke Jing, both of them, were completely certain that the dark forces had spread around Yiqing Luo's surroundings. Their target was definitely her. But what was the motive of controlling her? Do you still remember your profound jade heart? Zhou Xian's words reminded Yiqing Luo. She stood up abruptly as she turned around and looked at the calm Zhou Xian. You mean? It's not impossible. Zhou Xian's large palm gently caressed her face as a complicated emotion flashed past his peach blossom eyes. But Yiqing Luo's thoughts were placed on what Zhou Xian said and didn't notice the change in his expression. That's right. Her profound jade heart. Her profound jade heart was dug out. This body of hers obviously possessed an extremely strong and enviable top-grade profound jade heart, and by right it should be the best body to cultivate the profound grade. For someone who possessed this kind of profound jade heart, 1 day of cultivation was equivalent to 10 years of ordinary people. However, she couldn't cultivate and had no way to control the profound jade heart to cultivate the profound grade. In Old Man Song's words, her body and her meridians were all sealed by an extremely strong force. She had never thought about who the person who sealed her was. Ever since she was born, because she was appraised as a top-grade profound jade heart, it could be said that in the entire Three Springs city, or even in the West continent, she was hailed as a heaven's pride. And it was because of this beautiful reputation. As a result, when she was tested for profound qi, she was determined to be a trash meridian with no cultivation foundation, and her reputation became even worse. When she was tested for profound qi, she was only 3 months old. This was because when a profound practitioner was born, their body would be surrounded by a faint profound energy that would connect with the profound jade heart. Before she was 3 months old, the only people Yiqing Luo had contact with were her mother and Yi Tianquang. Yi Tianquang was absolutely unwilling to seal her meridians. After all, to Yi Tianquang, there was no one more important than the status of the Three Springs sect. If Yiqing Luo was a cultivation genius, he couldn't wait to announce it to the world. Then the only possibility was his mother. Did Nyangqin seal her veins after she was born? Towards her mother, Yiqing Luo didn't have many memories. Her mother died when she was 5 years old. A child's memory was not perfect. She only remembered that her mother was a very gentle and virtuous woman. Mother took care of her husband and taught her children, neither jealous nor jealous. She was also wholeheartedly devoted to Yi Tianquang. Yiqing Luo had never seen her mother use the profound grade. But her mother's identity was absolutely not simple. With Yi Tianquang's ambition, it was impossible for him to marry a woman without any status as his official wife. So much so that even after her mother passed away 10 years ago, she still retained her position as the official wife, and retained Yiqing Luo's identity as the D-daughter. Chapter 549. Most importantly, the 2 letters that his mother had left behind. The map in the 2 letters as well as the letter left behind by his mother, all indicated that the map was extraordinary. How could his mother be an ordinary person? Although Yiqing Luo didn't have a deep memory of her mother, but Yiqing Luo knew that her mother really doted on her. It was very likely that her mother sealed her meridians to protect her. Yiqing Luo's hand slowly covered her own heart and she could faintly see that piece of jade-shaped crystal in her body. This place had once nurtured that top-grade profound heart jade. The goal of the dark forces was very likely to be that profound jade heart. Yiqing Luo suddenly had a feeling of understanding. The goal of the dark forces is this body of mine that nurtures the profound jade heart. In other words, her profound heart jade was very likely dug out by people from the dark forces. Thinking of this, Yiqing Luo's eyes suddenly turned cold. Dark forces. Very well, she would remember this. Since the dark forces wanted to play with her, she would play with them till the end. Yiqing Luo's things since she had just snatched it, then she had to be prepared to return it 100-fold. Trying to set her up? He had underestimated her. Qing Luo, that castle lord of Death God Castle. Qiao Jin suddenly thought of something. When Yiqing Luo mentioned Death God Castle's castle lord, her expression turned grave as though she had seen a dreadful beast. Dizun came just in time today. Otherwise they wouldn't have been able to sit here so peacefully. But Yiqing Luo and Death God Castle's castle lord had met. That was to say, Death God Castle's castle lord knew that Yiqing Luo had barged into Death God Castle and brought away the exquisite pagoda. Wouldn't Death God Castle's castle lord remember Yiqing Luo? Zhou Xian. Mentioning that person, Yiqing Luo frowned as she sighed helplessly. That lunatic, he shouldn't. I'm here. Don't be afraid. Zhou Xian directly interrupted Yiqing Luo's words as he hugged her waist and lightly kissed her forehead. Everyone, holy shit. Caught off guard, he was fed a face full of dog food. How could he live? After resting for a moment, Yiqing Luo saw the 6 youngsters sitting on the ground in the courtyard. The surrounding youths looked at them enviously. Long Yunzhan led the remaining brothers and divided them into 3 teams. The first team accepted some low-level quests. One team would take on an intermediate quest or a low-level rare quest. The first team was personally led by Long Yunzhan to take on high-level missions. The process of this mission was surprising, thrilling, and exciting for these youths. It was completely different from the training and combat training they had in the academy. In the process of doing the mission, it was very likely that they would encounter all kinds of accidents, and they needed to deal with them according to the situation. Because of that, even though this mission wasn't long, it was still a great improvement for them. At this time, the 6 youths sitting in the courtyard were originally stuck at the mystic level, unable to advance. After this mission, they were promoted and immediately broke through the barrier of advancement. Especially when he followed Yiqing Luo into Death God Castle, that young man who almost fell into the swamp illusion was the most eye-catching. The space around the young man seemed to be burning. Balls of spiritual energy revolved around him unceasingly. Yiqing Luo's heart warmed up as she saw a black halo circling beneath the young man's feet, with 6 star patterns constantly lingering. Immediately following that, 2 more star patterns appeared indistinctly. Yiqing Luo's eyes flashed past a sliver of astonishment. He's actually going to advance by 2 grades. 2 grades. Chapter 550. The profound rank above the profound rank was as difficult as ascending to the heavens, even if it was just 1 rank. Among the youths there wasn't a single person who could rise 2 ranks in one go. Looking at the young man who was sitting on the ground with spiritual energy circulating around him, the other youths revealed looks of envy. The other youngsters who followed Yiqing Luo into Death God Castle naturally understood the reason for this youngster's advancement. However, he didn't expect that he would be able to rise by 2 ranks in a row. If they had known earlier, they would have also tried falling into the swamp. Who knows, they might have been able to level up. As the youth absorbed it, a burst of profound energy erupted. His body emitted an intense light that was dazzling. A powerful, profound energy rose from the youth's feet like a whirlpool. As soon as he opened his eyes, a sharp light burst forth from the youth's eyes. He stood up and clenched his fists. After feeling his strength, a joyful smile immediately appeared on his face. "Congratulations." A cold voice sounded beside his ear. The young man turned his head and saw Yiqing Luo, who was standing behind him. As usual, her black outfit accentuated her slender figure. His long black hair was tied up high and fixed at the back of his head, making him look valiant. However, the long and narrow expression on her face made her look even more charming. The youth's heart trembled. He cupped his hands and knelt on one knee. "Thank you for your guidance, Vice Commander." When he was in Death God Castle, he showed signs of advancing. At that time, if he had directly advanced, he would only have advanced a single grade. They would also be discovered by the guards of Death God Castle, causing the mission to fail. However, Yiqing Luo taught him how to guide his profound qi to store in his profound heart jade, and how to correctly combine profound qi with his profound heart jade. The profound energy that had always been stored within the profound jade heart had been under a high degree of tension for a long period of time. The change in his state of mind caused the fluctuations of his profound energy to become more and more intense. That was how he was able to advance 2 ranks. Everything was all thanks to Yiqing Luo. Those who are grateful are pure in heart. Yiqing Luo's lips curled as she helped him up and looked into his eyes. "What's your name?" "Baiming Lianqing." The youth's sonorous voice answered her question. "Norsi." Yiqing Luo raised her brows in surprise. This surname was really rare. Generally speaking, compound surnames belonged to large families. North Sea. This family name seemed to belong to a large aristocratic family from another continent. "Everyone has already advanced, right? Now, we need to set off to the Mercenary Association to hand in the mission." Qiao Jin's excited voice sounded from the inner courtyard. Then he walked out with a face full of smiles, and Yan Shaoyi followed behind him. Yiqing Luo nodded her head. Today, several teams had completed their tasks at hand. After completing the quest, it was best to hand it in as soon as possible. In case of any accidents, among the training missions, the contents of the missions overlapped quite a bit. For example, for a low-level training mission, Mission A would require a certain medicinal herb from a certain place, while Mission B would also require a certain medicinal herb from a certain place. Because of this, mercenary groups would often fight over the items they needed for their missions. Yan Shaoyi had already calculated, other than Yiqing Luo's high-grade rare mission, the other 3 small teams had completed 7 low-grade missions, 3 intermediate-grade missions and 1 high-grade mission. In total, there should be about 20 to 30 points of mercenary group honor points. Coupled with the high-grade rare mission reward in Yiqing Luo's hands, they could directly upgrade to a bronze plate mercenary group. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.